There you go. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our OD talk on why behavioral change in organizations is so difficult. When we were thinking about what to make the topic of our OD talk, I had actually on that same day been to a meeting. So it's a large SEO that we've worked with a bit in the past. And they contacted us and said they are going into a very big change project. It's their digital transformation. And they are at the moment just gathering information, and they would like to invite us to an information gathering session and give us 45 minutes to come and present how we would handle a project such as this, how we would handle the change, how we would approach it, and so on. And I actually said to my colleague, Dumisani, are they asking us for free consulting here? Because it sounds like we have to come and share all our expertise in this information gathering session. Anyway, so the brief was very high level. We weren't sure exactly what to prepare. So we were kind of prepared to talk about wherever the conversation went. And there was a lot of people in the room, quite a few senior people, and they told us a little bit about their digital transformation and the new systems that they're going to implement and how much they're spending on it. And, they can't afford that these systems then become white elephants. And we presented some of our frameworks that we would use and how we would approach a project like this, and had a few conversations. And then the one person turned to us and said, what I don't understand and what I want to know from you guys is, how do we get the behavior change? How do we get people to use the system? And how do we get people to change their behaviors in the way they use the system, and to change their mindset around these new systems? And I was sitting there thinking, that is such a loaded question. And I think if anybody had the recipe of, and immediately I was thinking Kotter, like create urgency, form a powerful coalition, create a vision for change, communicate that vision, remove the obstacles, create short-term wins, etc., 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 because it makes sense. And it's in a language that people understand. But anyway, so that meeting that day was an interesting one for me. They really almost wanted us to come and tell us how to solve this problem, and not necessarily to give the work to anybody to handle it themselves. Anyway, so that was part of the inspiration. At the same time, we are in the middle of a very big leadership project with an organization that's in the food manufacturing industry, going through a very difficult period of, I think it's CEO number 5 or 6 now in 2.5 years. Big changes in leadership, difficult shareholders, difficult environment, the economy and load shedding, and there's stuff happening in their world, like bird flu and things like that. And in the session, so we're doing 9 conversations in leadership with all the OpsCo teams. It's about 100 people in 10, 12 different leadership teams. And in each of those conversations, we're together for 4 hours, and it's a good conversation. Everybody is there. They are committed. They are not on their phones and their laptops. They really, really dig deep, and they have these conversations. And like, for instance, the one is about community and culture. And we talk about who are those communities? What is our influence in those communities? What is the culture in those communities? What is the culture in the organization? And we unpack the culture a little bit. And then we have some activities where we talk about, so what about the culture needs to change? What would that look like? How would you do that? And everybody is 100% committed and excited. And yes, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to walk out of here, and things are going to change. And then we see them a month later, and they almost can't even remember what this conversation was about. And you think, but it was so powerful. We were all so excited. And it's a month later, and what happened? You walked out of the session and became caught up in busyness, and the old ways of doing things. Yeah, and I mean, there's so many theories on behavior change. Just organizational behavior is a field on its own. I know most master's degrees includes OB, or organizational behavior, as a subject. Even my brother did a master's in IT 2 or 3 years ago, and organizational behavior was one of his subjects. I was very excited to get his textbook because it was a much newer version than the one I had. So yeah, organizational behavior is this field, this big field. And I know in South Africa, at a lot of the universities, if you wanted to do a PhD in OD, organization development, then you go under OB. And then if you have a look at theories and models and processes for behavioral change, there's a lot out there. And still, it almost feels like but why doesn't it work? Or why is it so difficult? There's stages, there's ways to do it. There's so much in the psychology literature about how we affect behavior change, why it doesn't work, how it can work, etc., etc. Yeah, so the invitation for today's OD talk was really I was hoping some clever people would come and join us and we can have a 90-minute or so conversation about why is it so difficult and where have we seen it work. So I'd like to start with that question. Where have you seen behavior change, positive behavior change work? In your organization, or in a team that you work, or if you're a consultant, in a client that you worked? Do you have any examples of successful behavior change that you can share with us? So let's start there. Janet, and I was wondering, because if you go through a lot of the theory on behavior change, then a lot of it says, build in some coaching, because that sustains. And I hear that, and it makes sense to me, because like I said, we walk out of a 4-hour 9-conversation session and everybody's excited, but what sustains that so that we don't, by the day after tomorrow, forget about what it is we talked about? Yeah. What are your thoughts, Janet?
I'm happy to jump in. I will always do that. Get the ball rolling. I think the first thought that comes to mind, and I have a lot because this is really what I do, it's my life, is that I think we lost sight of the fact that organizational behavior is fundamentally human behavior. Organizations are people. And by separating the two and talking about organizational change and separating it from people change, I think we lost an enormous amount. And part of the problem is that we have been practicing change in organizations for decades based on models like Kotter's model. And it's not that it's all wrong, but I think there are some fundamental flaws in it. And most of the others, ProSci is exactly the same. The whole notion of resistance to change is flawed in those models. And so, yeah, fundamentally, we have to begin, I think, with the notion that when we talk about change, we are talking about people. And we have to understand deeply how people do change, when they change, because they don't change easily. But they do, and they can. So that's a kickoff.
Any positive changes that you've seen that you understand how it happened? You can
2
share
comes
with
to
me.
mind. So yes,
Yeah.
I do quite a lot of leader development coaching, and I have one client in particular where they are just stunning when they bring me work. They tell me exactly what issue they want me to address, and they give me a decent amount of time to address it. And I have a background in psychology, and I work on 2 levels. One is with my psychology background, and the other is with strengths, and helping people to really understand themselves first and foremost, and why they behave the way that they do, and then help the organization as well and tell them, how do you actually optimize the support of this person in the change that you want from them? Because they're naturally wired this way, and this is why they're avoiding, this is why they're, losing their cool, this is whatever the behavior is. And then at an organizational level, I have one client, they've given me stunning work over the years. And one of the projects they gave me was to inculcate a certain ethos into the business as a kind of core strategic driver. And what we did there was we had a number of interventions, but we fundamentally we wired it into the system. So we wired the ethos into behavioral markers, like into the awards, into certain key interactions. And it's been very successful. I mean, I was with them again several months ago, and they just said, the one intervention, the one change that has really stuck in this organization is that one. But it's not simple, and it's not cheap because it's not quick.
Mm. So you said wired it into the system. It's almost design it into the system, right?
Yep.
And tie rewards to it.
Yes. But again, we have to be very careful of being too mechanistic.
Yes. Yeah.
I was struck, maybe just one comment before you move on to letting somebody else have their say, but I was really struck with what Anuna was saying, that, there's this ethos that says we need to get it done. And we're impatient to get it done. And I hate to say it, but it isn't ever going to get done. It is a moving target. It is a work in progress. And when you get to it, I promise you there's going to be a new it. And I'm sure Anuna knows that.
So yeah, the it almost becomes a end destination. Yeah, me and Mbali had the conversation the other day. What is it? The Kurt Lewin's framework: unfreeze, change, refreeze. And in today's world, the refreeze concept is like, and then what?
I was going to say, I think it's become the requirement now is much more fluid than that.
Yeah.
It's more about progress than it is about destinations.
Mm. So Anona, what did that bring up for you?
Yeah, as I mentioned also, Janet is from our team who's involved in all these change processes and things. And it's now internal. Our client is our own people. We have wired into our, if you talk about the system, I know it's much more than that, but we've wired into our presentations or anything that we do, we have a slide that says continuous improvement, and we, is better than no movement and that kind of thing. So we've got this little logo. So we're irritating everybody with that. But what we also bring in is values, organizational values. So we always have those values on our slide, and then also indicating which value we are responding to with what we're trying to do. or bring across, or facilitating with the people. So that is how we try from our side to do it, and we're not industrial psychologists. We OD people, so more normal only. We don't have the psychology background, but because we've got years of experience, we know that you can bring the best system. You can bring all the cool stuff, show them the vision, do everything, but everything can be perfect in terms of technical work. But if you don't get the person to want to do the change, and if you can't explain to them what's in it for them, that they get it, they will never change. They won't work towards the new thing or do that. So, yeah, but yes, as I said earlier, we are stuck, and it seems that I don't have to feel so bad about being stuck, because it is a difficult topic. Yeah, thanks.
Anana, have you had small wins? When you say you're stuck, was it working up to a point?
Yes, it is. It's like repetitive, as I say, showing that slide all the time. Say it's not perfect. We're not telling you what to do, because our big thing is now it's our colleagues. So they now saying we're doing all this work, and now you want to tell us how to do it. But we're not telling them how to do it. We're just trying to change processes and the associated behaviors into doing it in a new integrated way, and things that comes with the restructuring part. So it's been coming on a while. So I feel we are getting less resistance, especially from certain people, because also some people, you must know the person. And I think that's what Janet also referred to, knowing a person. So we decided to work with the difficult people separately, because some people, if there's an audience, they attack and they go all out, So we go out of that meeting bleeding. But when you talk to them as an individual, and in their office or wherever, face to face, and you explain and you have a conversation, then you get a positive feedback and input into what you're doing. So it's also changing for individuals in a sense, because at the moment there's a group of middle managers that's really difficult, and I know out of ATCA that they are difficult people. They make or break a change. But we have to work with them, because in essence, that is where the change should happen, because they must lead their teams into the change. So, yeah, so it is, the wins we've had was with changing to suit individuals' preferences, to just at least hear what we have to say, and then give their input, because we can't do anything without their input, because they're the ones doing the work. And yeah, they know what must be done. So yeah, that's what we try to do.
I'm so glad that Anina mentioned that it's sort of like an individual journey, because I believe that what works for one person may not work for the other person. And also Janet did mention that the frameworks, the change resistance frameworks that we use, in a way are flawed, because obviously they're just going to blanket everyone. And this is where the time and patience and effort comes in. Because now imagine in a huge organization, and you want to tailor each specific framework to one person, because there's so many people there that you're dealing with. And you need to understand the context. You need to understand the individuals that you're dealing with here, because people are unique. So what works for the other person may not work for the other person. So it is so important to be flexible and to make sure that your strategies are adaptable to suit each person's unique needs, or how the person responds. Also, I can imagine when you're using strengths, Janet, it's different for everyone, right? Also, as you mentioned, coaching is very important because hearing, and you can listen to webinars, you can attend training, and you hear this is the way we should do it. You get training. But now, once you get to your comfort zone, it's very easy to just revert back to your old ways, to your normal ways that we used to doing it this way and it works, and we just carry on and forget about the new thing that you've just learned and forget about the new process that's been introduced by the organization, because you know what, this works anyway. So yeah, it's challenging to change behavior. We just need to keep emphasizing the importance of creating the strategy to the context of the client or the organization, and be mindful of your audience and how they respond. Because you may work with a client this week and your framework, everything, the delivery, it works perfectly fine. Next month you get a similar case and it just doesn't work. So we just need to continuously be mindful of the context, the audience, and the fact that it's an individual journey.
Yeah, Janet, you use strengths. We like the Enneagram, which sometimes is already just a little hint on everybody's default reaction to change. But what I love about it also is that it can give you some hints on what would this human being, this unique individual, what kind of info would they need to be more accepting of the change, and to be less resistant, I guess.
Can I respond to that? And I don't want to, one of my sayings that I've been using for probably in excess of 10 years, people do not resist change.
Okay.
If I were to give every single one of you the keys to your dream car, your dream home, or what have you, and tell you that if you don't get out of here in 5 minutes, you're losing it, you'd all be gone. And that would be a massive change. We don't resist change. What we resist is pain and loss. And I'm using those two terms as fairly generic terms, but we resist pain. We resist stuff that is not easy. And that's the fundamental flaw with the models. In terms of what you just said, and Liesl, please, I've thought a lot about this, and I don't mean to be offensive. I want to pick up on something you said, because it's something everybody says, is we will give them the right information, because the models all say, communicate, 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 and then they will change. And quite honestly, I'm going to be very strong here. That's rubbish. There are some people who will change because you give them the right information. The vast majority of people are not going to change just because you told them to change, or just because you communicated enough information. That is, in my opinion, the fundamental flaw with the models.
Is that they think enough information means, okay, now it's going to work.
Yeah, if we just communicate, tell everybody what's going to happen, tell them when they've got to do whatever, tell them what, they will do it. No, because people are driven by their fundamental beliefs, their needs, their values, their all of those kind of things. And most importantly, change requires an enormous amount of additional effort and time. And we have to keep everything going the way, we've got to keep the business running, whilst at the same time we're doing all the work that has to be done in order to effect change. And we wonder why people go, flip, I can't do this, or I'm not going to do this, because it requires me to work harder, work longer hours, change all my interactions. Change is so complex most of the time. We cannot simply educate people into change. Sorry, I feel very passionately about this, you can see.
I hear you, Janet. So now I was wondering if then enough information doesn't do much, like effective communication is not going to cut it. Would then, because you spoke about motivations right now, about the needs of the people and stuff. So would then sort of like showing them the bigger picture, communicating, I'm a bit reluctant. I'm a bit reluctant to use that word now, but communicating the benefits of this change and also some reinforcements here and there. Does that make a difference?
It's a tiny piece of it, in my opinion. In my opinion, you can't not do that. People have to understand what you're doing. I'm not saying you shouldn't communicate. I'm just saying communication is not the solution. Listening is a far bigger part of this than telling. 100%, much bigger part of it.
So in your experience, when then you listen more and listen more effectively, what sort of response have you gotten from that? What do you get from it? And now I think it's the other side of the coin. Instead of just giving information, you also need to get the information from these people. So what have you gotten from using that strategy, listening more? What sort of information do you get that helps you facilitate the change?
So a typical question would be, what is going to make this change challenging for you?
Removing obstacles. What do you need?
Well, not exactly. So that's part of it. So if I ask that question, if I say, what will make this change difficult? I can ask that on a number of levels. I can ask, what's going to make this difficult for you on the level of your own personal belief and values? Number one. I can ask you, what is going to make this difficult practically? What's going to make this difficult in terms of the people that you're going to manage? What kind of response are you expecting from people? So there's a whole lot of that single question has so many layers. And depending on the answers I get, I then can do things. And yes, one of those might be, how do I make this easier for you? How do I facilitate and enable a smooth transition for you? How do I work with you, with the bigger system of which you are a part, to make sure that all the pieces are going to be well oiled and fit together and, and actually get the result we want? Because I, as a leader, can be very committed to saying, I'm going to do this. And the guy in the next department on whom I depend is not. And he's making my life difficult. So, I mean, those are just simple little examples. But when we start to listen, we start to understand the dynamics in the system that actually are the real root of resistance. And then, yes, sometimes it's, you know what? I need to talk with you as a person because you actually do have to change. But how do I help you change in a way that's going to be constructive for everybody?
And sometimes people resist just to resist.
Sometimes they do. But very seldom do people resist if it's actually really good for them. Sometimes they don't know it's good for them, though. But I would love to hear what Bukelwa and Lawrence and Ona have to say, because I'm doing a lot of talking.
I want to.
Sorry, I want to respond if you can hear me, but it's this. Can you hear me? But it's. No, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I've got a very flaky Wi-Fi bandwidth currently, so if you lose me, please, I'll try and repeat. There's such a lot of jewels that you're sharing out here. I'm trying to collect it as much as possible, so thank you for that. But I think where do I start with this? I think one of the biggest problems with change is that it ends up, and I'm not talking against or down to any of my colleagues or people, but we give it to the wrong people who follow a template. And they want one model and one spade and one button or baton, was probably closer to a police club. And they want to whack everybody and change them into a new direction and think everybody's going to be happy. It's much more complex than that. There's a change. For me, there's a difference. Don't ask me to try and define it right now. But the difference between change management and management of change is two different things. And then behavioral change is completely something else. And it ends up with people that's usually very organizational driven, process driven, etc. And I think, Janet, you touched on it. There's a psychology behind it that's so important. And for me, I hear you, I hear what you said, you listen, and it's very important, but you need to understand the psychology behind it also. And just off the cuff quickly, except for different peoples from the Enneagram, where they get the energy from, what their profiles are, what their preferences are, there's the model of reasoned action and model of reasoned behavior. I don't know if you know that, which is very, very powerful. If I remember correctly, it's Feuerstein and Asian, I think it's two Israeli guys that did it. And there's a lot of good work on it. But they tell you why people will change and why people will behave. Yes?
The model of what?
Reasoned action.
Reasoned.
Yeah, reasoned action, yeah, and reasoned behavior, which tells you a lot about how people will. Briefly, it says that people will behave if there's a perception. I will change if there's a perception that somebody else important in my life will consider this and what their perception about me changing will be. If I think that this group will think it good that I change, I might be swayed to change. But then also there's a part that says, I might weigh up the consequences or the benefit of this. So I will change if there's a benefit for this. If everybody now pushes us back and say, go back to your office, you have to work in office, I might think it's a good idea because the group says so. But as an individual, I say to you, but at what cost do I need to go back to an office? That brings me to David Rock's SCARF model. I don't know, probably you know that. Which says whatever action you want to bring about, whatever change you want to bring about, ask yourself, what are the consequences? What's the price to be paid? And that basically helped me, Janet. You're nodding your head, and I'm so glad somebody, because I haven't checked up on the detail. But it basically says there are 5 things, and help me here, Janet. It's what is the status? How will this change my status? Second one is how will the continuance change, if I remember correctly? Then what is the autonomy will change? Then there's an R, I can't remember the R, relationship, I think. Relatedness, and F is for?
Fairness.
Fairness, yeah. How does this bring change and affect any one of those 5 areas? And you need to ask yourself, if you want to challenge any one of those, if it affects on any one of those 5, it will not be to my benefit. And I'll have to really consider this. And we go blindly into change and change behavior without thinking about this. And then one of my postgraduate topic was sense of coherence. To what extent does this change, is this change understood by the individual in terms of sense of coherence? And sense of coherence basically have 3 components. One is, what is your understanding, your cognition of this change? What does it mean, the detail, the facts? Secondly, to what level am I able to manage this change? And the third one is, to what level, or what is the meaning of this change? If it means, it's like a return to office, understand the detail, understand some of the realistic, I understand the reasoning, etc. But the management, it's impossible for me to manage it, so it makes it difficult. And the meaning of this means that I will be at a big disadvantage to do this. So I have to look at all of those facets to actually start changing people's behavior. You can apply this to voter. How many people are going to vote next year? How many people are going to use HIV preventative models or techniques or whatever? How many people are going for vaccination? And you can apply this to all of those changes that you want to bring about. And every time I've tried to impose this or put this forward or suggest this, they said, no, we don't have time. And it's given to somebody with a model. It's either, well, any one of the change models, and they run through the change model A, B, C, D, E. And then after a year, 2 years, they say it didn't work, we have to redo it. Then they run again A, B, C, D, E, or they run E, D, C, B, A, or whatever. And the same result, and they don't listen. So for me, it's the psychology behind behavior. Behavior is a habit. And behavior does not come about because it's uncomfortable. behaviors because there's some value for it in that. And if this, I mean, I can get on my mountain bike and start cycling again because there's a valid value for me in that. But if it becomes painful and it becomes cumbersome, etc., I will probably stop doing that. So we have to understand that consumer psychology is very good at this. How do you change people's opinions, people's values, people's behavioral, consumer behavior, etc., etc. And in a workplace, we fail miserably at this. Sorry, a lot said here, but yeah, probably I should write a book about this at some stage. Or an article. But yes, we get stuck with the psychology side. You tell me to change driving from the left-hand side to the right-hand side of the road. No, I will not. And last thing, sorry, I just remember something. I think you said something, people resist just merely because they want to resist. It's usually the skeptics that resist. Or not usually, sometimes them as well. And remember, the definition of a skeptic is a disillusioned idealist. So people became disillusioned about the reality. We've been through this so many times. With this beat, this drum has been reskinned so many times. We just beat it up again and reskin it again. And there's no change, nothing. The more things change, the more they're the same. And as old Emeritus Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, the one thing we learn from history is that we don't learn from history. We do the same thing over and over and over and over again. Sorry, but that's my 5 cents this morning.
Thank you, Lawrence. That was nice. And please don't hurry. If there's only a few of us, I'm loving where this conversation is going. Everybody's introducing new concept. Tell me again, a skeptic is a disillusioned idealist.
Yeah, there's a disillusioned idealist. Yeah, I've been branded as a skeptic because where I started off and where I'm now is completely. I mean, it's 160, 180 degrees away from where I started off. Yeah, so.
So, what I was thinking, you brought up so many things. We have, as part of our leadership program, we've got a short module on leading change. First, we called it navigating change. Then we called it change resilience. Then we called it change champions. But you can call it whatever you want. It is a short, like 4-hour, very, very, very practical, interactive workshop that is trying to introduce the concept of change to people who don't have change management or any HR, OD, OB, industrial psych, anything like that. They are line managers. It is the supervisor in the warehouse, or, you know, and to just give them a basic concept. And in some clients, if they're going through a big change, then they would send a bunch of line managers on this workshop just to give them the basic. And we talk about the types of change, you know, that which is done to me, that which I do to others, etc. We introduce the change curve, and the fact that all change, and exactly what you said, that Janet, is we're resisting the loss. Change involves emotions. And for a lot of these managers, line managers, it's like, oh. And if you don't realize these are human beings and you are putting them through a psychological process because you're telling them to stop doing what they like doing, or to stop sitting next to their friend, or to, you know, whatever it is that was comfortable in the groove, the way we've done it for the last 10, 15, whatever years, stop doing that. So you're immediately evoking a huge response. And you got to know that, and you got to deal with it. And then it's not just one emotion, it's the whole, you know, Kubler-Ross type of curve thing. And as a manager, you have to know that there's a dip. There's that dip where you will have a loss in productivity. It will happen. But if you handle it well, then you might be able to minimize the loss in productivity. But ignoring the fact that it's an emotional reaction or psychological process will make you probably drown in that dip of productivity and not get out of it. Okay. Anyway, so there's a bunch of stuff in there and like practical unpack things. And then we talk a bit about resistance. So I think what Mbali said, because we ask them, think about your own life. Have you ever resisted just for the sake of being difficult? And like 99% of people go, yes. I mean, we can all think of times in our lives where we've just been difficult for the sake of it. And it might be that, geez, this is change number 10 in the first quarter of the year. I'm so over it. Go away. I'm ignoring you. It might be that kind of resistance. It's just like, I'm hurtful. But there can be a whole bunch of other reasons. I've personally resisted because I don't like people telling me what to do and I don't agree with them. And then I'm super difficult, extra difficult, more difficult than what I need. Anyway, and then we talk a little bit about how do we work with resistance. And it's exactly that what you said, Janet. And a lot of it that comes out is there is still resistance because people don't have enough information. So that's where I was coming from earlier is, you know, the change is introduced. We're going to do this new system. Wonderful. Go. There's your training. Start using it. It's like, oh, hang on. Oh, you know, I don't have enough information about what this means for me. What's going to change in my life? Why should I use it? Am I going to lose my job because now everything is automated, etc., etc. So often we do still need information, but it is because it's a loss. It is painful. It is scary. It is uncertain. I don't know what it looks like on the other side. We also talk about the Dunning-Miller-Gleicher change readiness formula. Just a little bit about, you know, these people that you want to implement the change on or with. Do they understand what it's going to look like? Do they understand the first steps, etc., which is useful to think through your preparation for a change. And think through where is your audience in terms of what is about to come and what is about to happen. And then something that we put in there that is so interesting because it almost just goes, oh, okay, is the adoption curve, where you have your early adopters up to your laggards, you know, the late majority, etc. And then the conversation goes to, let's say in a previous restructure, there might have been somebody who then actually landed their dream job and things worked out well for them. And you know, and the person who sits next to them in the previous restructure was retrenched, lost their job, had a horrible experience. Now you introduce restructure. And because of people's previous experiences, and that's just a very simple example, you know, any change, you're going to get different levels of resistance because of previous experiences that's been either good or bad for me, or I'm indifferent at this point. And how the same person can be an early adopter for some things, but a late adopter or a stubborn laggard right at the back for other things. In the same team, in the same organization, I often use the example of my dad, who lived in Austria for 13 years, and they lived in this tiny little village that 80% of their electricity was wind-powered, those things outside the village. And he got so into green energy that when he moved back to South Africa to come and retire here, like immediately everything had to be, and it's before, we were still in a very light load shedding thing back then when this happened. And he is like early adopter when it comes to anything about living off the grid and sustainable energy and green energy and that kind of thing. And he's 80. But when it comes to his cell phone, the thing was like 16 years old or something, you know. But then last year, the new stuff that was installed on his solar system works on an app. And this old phone cannot do that app. And he had to go and get a new phone. So there was like, you know, we on one type of tech, he's an absolute early adopter, almost an innovator. Same human being on another type of tech, stubborn, no thank you, never going to adopt this thing. up to the point where, oh, hang on, if I adopt this thing, then this thing becomes better, easier, and makes more sense to use. Anyway, so the adoption curve then also helps us look at why are certain people less likely, more resisting more. Because in the adoption curve, you've got different levels of resistance at different points from different people. And it maybe just gives you another angle. And Nona, I'm thinking about you with your difficult middle management group at the moment. I don't know if the adoption curve might give you a different angle to try and think about, but why specifically? Because if you say middle management group, then it's not necessarily one or two individuals. It's like almost like a layer in the structure that is difficult, and there could be reasons why that you can go look for what is that resistance anyway. And then the end of this workshop is to help these people see there will be resistance. How do I treat resistance as something positive? It is people telling me what they still don't know. It is people telling me why they're scared. It is people telling me how to remove obstacles. If I look at resistance as something positive. And it's a wonderful, very useful little workshop to just like get people who's never thought of change other than pass it on to the change managers and and make sure we communicate to give them a little bit more of an idea of what's going on there. Okay, I'd love some more opinions.
But maybe just on your point of resistors and resisting, I just remember somebody, an old HR director many years ago, he asked me, why does a car have brakes? If you think about it, why does a car have brakes? Why does your car have brakes? And he said, because you can drive fast. Because without brakes, you cannot drive fast. You'll just glide somewhere. And that concept, if you can bring it across to a group, that they are resistors, but they're good. And you just turn that out into the positive and find out why. Because sometimes, I think most of the time, the cynics and the resistors will be the people that say, listen, but you're so overwhelmed with the euphoria of this change that's going to bring about that you actually forget that, this car is beautiful. You can drive at 300 kilometers an hour. But gee, guys, have you ever thought about braking, about stopping? What if there's a hurdle or an obstacle in the road? So that's very important, is that we recognized in the group. And those people, those resistors are not, and they often, most time that I've come across them, or groups dealing with them, or change people dealing with them, they are actually branded as the negatives and not wanted in the group because you don't play along. And it is bad. I mean, and on a much more defined or individual level, one morning I might be able to and might be open to change, or one moment, and then just something else might come about, and I might just decide tomorrow morning, nope, I'm not up for this. So, but that also need to be respected, and then also who brings that message. I've had the same message communicated to a group of people by two different people. The one was just in it was the most senior leader in that group. It was just ignored. But when I brought in one of the middle managers, much more liked in the group, etc., much more team player, etc., and suddenly this idea flew. Nothing has changed. The idea remained the same, and there was some consequences. But I mean, as I'm sitting here, there's people's names that I can list and say, if they now tell me to change something, I will just basically just tell them to pick a direction and fly. I'm not going to do it. But if the right people ask me to change, most probably I'll do. I'll seriously consider that. And I think politics is one of the areas where it's a wrong spokespeople, it's a wrong figureheads, it's wrong images that's created, and that's why they're losing people. And companies the same. If you look at some companies, if you look at their spokespeople, it's horrible to think that person will bring about change, or that person will actually Yeah, lead to the promised land. Nope, not. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work in my book.
That's an interesting concept. So the person asking you to change might just be the silver bullet. But I mean, it's so true. If it's somebody you respect and you have a lot of time for, and you like their opinions and all things about them, and they ask you, then you'll probably give them way more time. Really listen, and you want to please them most probably. So.
Two thoughts quickly that just sparked by Lawrence or by the general conversation. The first is that sometimes we actually just make too big a deal of change. We make a big song and a dance and a hoo-ha, and we actually invite people to resist, in the sense that we create fear, we create anxiety, we do all of those kind of things, instead of just allowing things to happen. I mean, I remember very specifically in one workshop I was doing with some people around big, some fairly big strategic stuff. And they said, okay, who do we tell them? When do we tell them? I said, you don't say a darn word. We're just going to do this, and we're going to do it quietly, and we're going to do it systematically, and we're going to do it systemically, and it's just going to happen, and nobody has to get upset about it. So I think that's the one thing. And then the other thing, in terms of what Lawrence was saying, and again, it's from a sort of strengths base, but Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats is a very useful framework for me, because it says that all of those hats, and if you don't know, I'm not going to explain it, but go and look up Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats. He talks about the importance of the black hat conversation. And the black hat conversation is, this is what I don't like, this is what's wrong, this is what the problems are going to be. And there are some people who are really wired to see those things really well. From a strengths perspective, the deliberative talent sees risk. And we're so fixated on let's be positive and let's be rah-rah and hoo-ha and whatever, that we still those voices. And we don't allow people to bring the value that they bring to this conversation. There are other people who are going to say, well, we could do it even better if we did this or this or this. And so we need the red hat where we're talking about our feelings and those kind of things. And we need the black hat that's going, here are all the things that could go wrong. We should watch out for blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And then, yes, we need the yellow and the green to go, this is what's great about it. And here's how we can do it even better and be creative.
I'm hearing all Enneagram styles when you talk about it.
Yeah, that's it.
But whatever framework, there's the Enneagram 6 is that black hat, which is also the skeptics. Anyway.
That's me.
What? No, I use Enneagram 6.
Yes. And I must say, I think in the organization of 60 people, I think there's 2 or 3 of us. So we
And sorry, Anona, when you are being skeptical, when you are being 6, you're not necessarily saying no.
Yes, definitely not.
We need to think about certain things before we do this or while we're doing it.
Yes.
You're not saying no. And we interpret your questioning as no.
Yeah, and that is the difficult people in the room. That's oftentimes I want to listen to them, because they're not difficult for the sake of being difficult, because I also know the person now that I'm thinking of specifically, and then other people would just say, no, she's difficult, we're not gonna entertain that. And I know she's got a reason, because I am an Enneagram 6, fortunately a little bit to the 7 side, not to the quiet one at the when I stress. So I do question that, and that is a very important thing that you're bringing with the hats. It's easy for me because I'm visualizing the hats now. The different hats and bringing in the Enneagram, because we've done that, and we also to the insights with regards to understanding the people better. So yes, thanks. I'm listening and making notes.
Yeah, Enneagram 6s just wants to be ready. They want to feel ready. They want to, they're our scenario planners.
Yeah.
I often, if I have to make a decision, think, oh, who can I phone? What 6? And then I just something very interesting. We've been, I think last year we did over 400 Enneagrams for different clients. Very, 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 very few 6s. But 6 as a thinking style, if you look at the tri-style, a lot. And often when we then do a team profile, we'll find the team profile has 6 as the thinking style. So the decision-making style, the risk averse. And in COVID, somewhere towards the end of 2020, somebody, like a specialist in the Enneagram world, said to me, you know, people's 6s are spiking. Because I think it was like, if I call Enneagram 6s the worst case scenario people. And if we thought about the worst case scenario for the world, it happened in 2020, you know. So I think even if you had a little bit of 6 in you, it was like, whoop, spike.
Right, I was right.
Yeah, see, I've been telling you. Anyway, and Anna, I think if you have something like the Enneagram that is already there, goodness, use it and make a fun session out of it. If you go Google how does each Enneagram style handle change? We've got a default, you know, the 7s are like, yay, something new, give it to me, shiny, ooh, FOMO, you know. Then get those 7s on as your champions. Get the 6s to make the plan. Get the,
yes,
you know,
I'm gonna get
of...
that, and I'm gonna put it on the head so that I can remember who's who.
Yeah.
I'm gonna combine it with the hats.
Yeah. Because it helps. It helps so much. Anyway.
It also reminds me, you know, the labeling of people, and I know I'm moving very much away from specific profiles and definitions or diagnostics and say a person is a 6 or a 5 or whatever, although it's very important to understand, because you live your label at the end of the day, and that's a big concern for me. So, but yes, there are tendencies and traits and etc. that we need to take note of. But what I come across also in change is that I think it's Carl Jung who said that thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. It's easier to label somebody and force them to live that label than actually to really have a conversation. And that brings me to the book by and the work by Nancy Klein that says time to think and more time to think. The second book is just to follow up on the first, but it's the same book. Excellent. And that's time for people to actually sit and what you say is some people are, you want to make a decision, Liesl, with your phone, not to give you a clear black or white answer, yes or no, or go or stay or whatever, but it's I assume, like me, I want somebody that can throw around ideas and you know, through reasoning and sometimes I'll play devil's advocate and throw out something that's completely horrible just to stir up some emotion and some different thinking. But that's the value of it. And I think we've lost that ability in organizations as well. We live in a fast food and a fast ATM and a fast this and a quick this era.
Instant
and it's
gratification.
so detrimental to creativity and growth. Instant gratification, you're right. We need this it to be done. And don't ask me to define it. We'll beat it until we have something that we can call it. If you I don't know if you have done that work from Nancy Klein, but if you think about how many companies, how they've saved billions, millions of billions of rands and dollars by just spending some time and thinking clearly about it, entertain the skeptics and the resistors, and really come to a better decision at the end of the day and change behavior accordingly.
Yeah, so we in this little leadership program, we start with practicing listen to understand instead of listen to respond. And that's already like because we listen to respond, right? And that's already a difficult thing. And then go into the how do you, if somebody doesn't respond immediately, or there's silence, or they tell you something and then they go quiet, shush, because they're thinking. And how do you, without having the time to really go into Nancy Klein's stuff, we try and just get those ideas in. But I wanted to say something else, Lawrence. I don't know if you or anybody on this call have heard of Socratic questions. I listened to a podcast last week where Alon Reis was talking about Socratic questions, and he said when it was first introduced to him by his mentor years and years and years and years ago, it was before Google and everything. So he went to the local library and said, well, he needs to find out more about Socratic questions. And the librarian gave him a book on Socrates, and he said he took the book and it was the most boring book, but he read the whole thing. But anyway, so Socratic thinking, or Socratic questions, I think Lawrence probably like talks about what you were just talking about. It's like, am I asking the right questions? Am I getting there instead of just like being, focused on one thing and blindly having taken a decision?
Yeah. But on Socratic questions, and I'm not even close to be competent in using it, although I wish I could. The lawyers are good at it, lawyers and advocates. But they're also branded as difficult. When you keep on asking questions and you try to find out, okay, what's more? Tell me more. Why? If you start with a simple and change management, the why questions, people get so annoyed because everything is this instant gratification. We want one answer. We want you to know that answer now. And without going through the laborious process, which is, I enjoy those processes. And listen, I hang myself up in many meetings, in many conversations where I afterwards thought, oh my goodness, how did I get there? But at least somebody else will say, listen, you said something that makes sense. Let me think about it. And then I said, aha, okay, if I only made you to think about it, then I've succeeded. And yeah, going back to behavioral change then is, oftentimes we don't know why we do things until we start interrogating it and pushing that boundary and say, but why do you prefer certain toothpaste? I mean, there's a whole story about my daughter and toothpaste, Kitty's toothpaste changed into adult toothpaste. That was traumatic change for her. But, until you actually later on discuss it and you actually play with the idea, as simple as that, to understand why and how that is actually playing out in her mind. So, yeah, but that conversations, that's so important.
I think, Lawrence, what you've just said, for me, comes down to one of the most fundamental things, and that is that behavior is rooted in our beliefs.
100%.
I popped a book reference into the chat, which really does also speak to this. But fundamentally, everybody has an individual belief structure. And Lawrence, you kind of alluded to this earlier when you said, the reasons we do things are sometimes very convoluted. And they don't always make logical sense, but they actually do make sense at a psychological level. A lot of people who behave in very weird ways are behaving to protect themselves, to look at those scarf factors, and there are lots of different models that use the same fundamental 5 aspects of personhood: physical, social, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual reasons. They're complex, but at the very heart, if you want to shift behavior fundamentally and sustainably, you have to do it at the level of belief. And you don't.
Well, if I can add and reply to that's very accurate way how you summarized it. I've had maybe 4 or 5, I would say, really successful coaching sessions or coachees that I've had. I've had many. Some of them, I think it's a lifelong process just to get them to understand that they need the work done. But in all of them, often people ask me, so what approach do I do? Therapy or counseling or coaching or mentoring or whatever? I say it's so fluid between. You never know where you are. In some sessions you just end up teaching. That's it. It's board and chalk. We go through an article, read through an article, and say, listen, accumulate as much as possible of this information. But what the successes of those successful changes in individuals' behavior was really to challenge them on that level of Socratic questioning of their belief system and say, but why do you push on for this? You want to become an MD. Why? Yeah. What's in it for you? Have you spoken to those people and actually understand what's the burden? What's the sacrifice that you need to make? You've got 2 beautiful children. You like playing with them, right? Like cycling in the afternoon. You know that once you move into that position, you will probably spend 70 to 80% of your time either abroad or away from home. Are you willing to sacrifice that? And then you get to a belief system. Yes, but I need to push for this because I'm the first person in my family that's advanced in their career, or I'm the first one in the family that stand a chance to become an MD. And I said, okay, so once you've reached that position, so what will it mean to you? Yeah, but I'm the first person in my and this was one case specifically, was an African family, the first person that went to study, first person that got a degree, first person now that got an opportunity. And ultimately the individual said, there's a cultural aspect also to that, an expectation from the culture. But I said, okay, put that aside. Ask yourself, what do you want? What do you want? And may I say that I think I've been successful in coaching that individual probably out of the system, because he realized, but that push, that own drive was based on falseness. He was playing to a pavilion, and it's not what's making him happy. And he changed his behavior. And where he is now is much happier, content. He's a super specialist in what he's doing. And he's really spending as much time as possible. He can work from home, doesn't need to go abroad. And if he go abroad, he can actually take his family along. And so, yeah. But it's all about a belief system, yeah. Oh, it's also about a belief system, not just all about it. It's also about a belief system.
We have just over 10 minutes left. That was a nice conversation. I want to check in with, oh my, she's not here anymore. No. I was going to check in with Bukalwa to see what she was thinking. In the beginning, she said she was a industrial psychology intern. So I was going to ask her, what did she hear? But anyway, she's not there anymore. Would anybody else like to raise some closing thoughts? Ruben, you joined us about half an hour in. I don't know if you took anything, or you'd like to comment on anything that was said in the last hour.
Hi, sorry, I joined a bit late. I had another meeting that went late, but I have been listening keenly to the conversation, and I'm starting my practice on change management, and so this has been interesting for me. And the perspective shared by different people, I think, has been great. I'm still learning, and I hope to contribute more in future events. Thank you.
Congratulations, Ruben, on your practice.
I see Mbali is at the beach now.
I just took a trip to the Maldives.
Okay.
I was also curious to hear from Hafiz, but I see we've lost him now. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly.
Hafiz joined like literally 7 minutes ago. I think he's having bandwidth issues. So, yeah.
I was wondering how much did he catch of the conversation?
How about you, Mbali?
Well, I've heard a lot during this conversation. And most of the references, I'm very curious about them, the theories, the books and stuff, but I couldn't, like, it was too quick for me to catch the names. So I was relying on your notes, because I know Liesl probably has like 3 pages of notes. So yeah, that's so yeah, that's one thing I appreciated about this conversation, that I have a lot of reading that I need to do from everything I picked up here. And I wanted to check with you on those references. Very fruitful conversation.
Yeah, I think if I have to think about my big takeaways from today, like Janet said in the beginning, change is about people. And if we forget that, then
you've lost the plot.
Yeah, and it's one thing for us as OD practitioners to not forget it, but then get pulled into a project where that is not the underlying thinking. You know, make it happen. Get buy-in. Get them to start using the new system, that kind of thing. Which is often, unfortunately, and Ruben, that is often where the change managers gets called in. All the decisions have been made, the new system's been like implemented, we're about to go live, etc., etc. Now get buy-in and make them use it, which is very difficult. The complexity of change, yes, but maybe we mustn't make too much of a drama about it. Like Janet said, sometimes we might be causing more anxiety than what is needed and what is necessary. There's so many models. I mean, yes, Mbali, I wrote some down, you know, and I think you can really think yourself into circles. So I guess the type of work that we do, you know, I fully believe that everything that organization development people do causes change. So we work with change the whole time. Because if we're not changing the leadership for the better and the culture for the better and the team dynamics for the better, then we're not doing anything. So everything we do causes change. Everything we touch changes and changes around us, and we work with it the whole time without necessarily needing a ProSci or a Kata framework to go put it into little boxes. Which I guess then sometimes can then make us feel like, oh, why didn't this happen? Have I forgotten how to do it? But it's real. And then yes, the topic was, why is behavior change so difficult? And I think the last bit that Janet and Lawrence was talking about, behavior is rooted in beliefs. And behavior is there to protect us. And then, Lawrence, what you threw in is so true. Cultural expectations and cultural beliefs can sometimes make us behave in a way that's not necessarily the true us, which is something that we have to remember when we work with behavior change. Yeah, those are my main takeaways for today. Does anybody else want to add a closing thought?
I would like to advocate for a change in our language.
Mm-hmm.
And it is rooted in my belief that management and leadership coexist, but they are not the same. Management is managing resources, leadership is leading people. And that we stop talking about change management, because then we are going to slip into mechanistic ways of thinking. And we start talking about change leadership.
And then, Janet, if we say that, then there's a place for both, right? Because we do need managers to manage resources and outcomes and KPIs and things like that. We need them.
I wouldn't put KPIs in the same place, because KPIs are people. But yes. The technical stuff and the processes are absolutely
boxes and keeping the structure in place, and you need that kind of management in a team, in an organization, in a division, in a
100%.
for it to work. Somebody said to me the other day, Christopher Columbus, visionary leader. If you didn't have captains for each ship to manage that ship, nothing would have happened. So yes. So then change leadership, I agree with you. It's a different thing, but we do need change management. Or do we?
We need to manage the resources within the change context.
If I may add on to that, I think, and I'm talking now as I'm thinking, so I might put my foot into it right in it. I think there's a process that needs to be managed. And that's important. You always need to have the composition of that OD team. And I'm actually probably should put it under the heading of the OD team, the composition of that team. There's people that I'm very disorganized. I don't have a filing system. I have a very excellent filing system. So that's me. But I usually find stuff that other people has lost long ago. Then there's a big red flag for me. If anybody, and I'm saying this also with due respect to anybody that might follow, if I did change management or involved with this and say, yeah, but I only follow the Prosky or a Quater or whatever, a model, then I'm already immediately wary, is this the right? Tell me, do you understand the change principles, principles in the broad sense of the word, then I think you can work with me. And lastly, for the best and the better change processes and projects that I've been involved with, make sure, if possible, and I have to advertise my profession here, make sure that you have somebody that understands, a psychologist that understands human behavior. And I'm not saying other people don't have a feel for this, but really have a good understanding for human behavior. Have a psychologist that's specifically on a shoulder to shoulder, same height, same level, same magnitude, same level of power in the team, be able to stand up and say, guys, you're messing up. This is not how it's done. Let's go back to the human behavior. Let's look at the belief systems, because it's not the it that we need to make happen. It's people that we need to take along. And make sure that and then the question is always, people dive into, but it's industrial psychology or clinical or counseling, whatever. Go and find a psychologist that understand human behavior. I've worked with, I'm an industrial psychologist. Training was initially clinical counseling, but I've worked with industrial psychologists that are better at understanding human behavior than clinical and counseling psychologists. So don't get into the trap of anyone. Go and find a person that you can work with that's open enough and willing enough to challenge the thinking about human behavior and why people act the way they do. But make sure that individual has got the power and the position in that team of yours to be able to stop a process or to intervene on a significant level and say, whoa, now you're hitting completely, you're beating your ship captains with a stick. You still want them to sail safely across the ocean. It's not going to happen. So make sure that composition. And this thing about, let's talk about the principles. That's something that I've learned many years ago and actually forgot about it for a very long time, and only not too many years ago started picking up on it, is rather than go for a model, let's go for the principles. Do you understand the principles? And stick to that. That's my take from it, and very valuable inputs from everybody. I appreciate it much. Looking forward to the next one, Liesl.
Yeah, we've run out of time. But I echo what you just said, Lawrence. I found this very valuable. I think if these talks didn't make us think harder and deeper and open us up for new, hang on, I've got to go check out that thing that somebody mentioned, and this has made me think. Tomorrow we're facilitating that leading change module in a public class, and I'm already thinking of about 25 things that I want to add for that. Just to challenge the thinking a little bit more. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. I cannot tell you how privileged I feel to have people like you in our Worldview community that is willing to give up your precious time to come and talk to us, and just, you know, shoot the breeze about the stuff that we're passionate about, and try and figure it out. So thank you so much. Hope to see you again soon.
Yes, thanks, Liesel. Can I just add, just to put it together for myself? There's something of your colleague Dumasani that we remember when we were in training with him. He used to say, all models are wrong, but some are useful.
Yes.
And we often use that when at work, where we say, can you remember what Dumasani said? And we'll ask him. And then, so yeah, that sums it up for me in terms of this thing today again. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I was thinking of that while Lawrence was talking, and so I'm glad you said that. All models are wrong, but some of them are useful.
Yes,
and
definitely. Thank you.
Bits of them are useful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Goodbye.